Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at some new information from an interview that Yoshi P did with Famitsu. Now the link to the original article is in the description as a source, but it is in Japanese. This translation was actually sent to me around my normal stream time end by someone on Twitter at LKN111. They sent me a DM with the translation of this, so I'm using their unofficial translation, and a link to their Twitter will be in the description of the video as well. Thanks. I just was about to go looking for it at the end of stream, and they said, hey, I did this. Would you want it? And I said, sure, I'll take a look at it. I'll use that for a video. Absolutely. So keep in mind it is an unofficial translation though, so it's always subject to change, or, you know, there's always things that could be off for Yoshi P's intent wasn't all the way portrayed. This is something we always say whenever there's an unofficial translation, that the information is always subject to being different when we finally hear it or see it in action. Also, definitely spoilers. Kind of been spoilers on the screen for the last however many minutes now, but if you're looking forward to 5.5, then, you know, it's 5.4 spoilers. So first of all, in the interview, they start with the main scenario. 5.5 will, of course, start after 5.4. They start from Fandaniel's appearance in Alamigo, hanging in the Hanging Gardens and chasing Lunar Bahamut. An important character that will play a crucial role in the Zodiark versus Heidelin story will make an appearance. Now, they make no mention of if that's a character we already know or a character we don't know. Honestly, Estinian is going to be, you know, returning to us. He'll be a trust member. They've already revealed in 6.0. So I wonder if it's just the reincorporation of Estinian and his important role in the end of all of these things, or if it's a brand new character, somebody that knows of the Talaferoi or the Telephone, I can't remember how to pronounce it, a Fandaniel and his lunkies, and it's someone who can work against him. We don't know which one that's going to be. The main story will, as usual for patches before an expansion, be split between Part 1 and Part 2. And originally in A Realm Reborn, these were two fairly large patches. Ever since then, they've been kind of like a normal patch split in half. So very much expect to end Part 1 on April 13th going, really? Here? Because that's exactly what happened in Stormblood. The 5.5 new instance dungeon will have something to do with the Amalja tribe. Yeah, it's in Pagalthon. Of course it's going to have to do with the Amalja tribe. Still banking on Lunar Ifrit being the final boss of that one. And then finally, one last quote that's really strange. I won't say Gaius won't have a role to play in the 6.0 main scenario, but I can't promise you he's going to have a main role. It sounds like Gaius is going to maybe be present and maybe not. Who knows? That sentence really doesn't tell us anything. It seems like they're trying to let people down easy and saying Gaius is not like a main character and he's not going to be traveling along with us the whole time. Curious to see what happens at the end of the World storyline with him and what his future ambitions are going to be. Now moving on to the Nier raid, as we have it right here, making sure it shows properly in this on the side because I know my cropping's a little weird. So you guys know, not super pumped about this, but I'm giving it one last chance. The series will come to its conclusion in 5.5 with a third Alliance raid, but the ending might be slightly different when compared to the previous Alliance raid series. I'm telling you, they're gonna make us New Game Plus this multiple times to get the true end. Everyone who knows Nier has been saying it ever since New Game Plus was incorporated. I am a firm believer that is what will happen, and these lines all make me believe it more, which I think could actually be a pretty cool thing. As much as I'm not a super big fan of what they've done so far, going out on a bang can always be a good way to wrap up something that was otherwise kind of lukewarm. Alexander I felt that way about. Omega I definitely felt that way about. So we'll see if this final Nier raid can actually deliver on something that, even if it doesn't have to do with 14, is a little more enjoyable at the very least. We've gone wild content-wise, and that Nier feel will be all over the place. Again, content-wise, it's a 24-man. Content-wise, it's always the same thing. So I wonder how much of this is just like the translation from Japanese to English with talking about, I guess, how much detail went into the Alliance raid itself, or again, if they're talking about the New Game Plus and the various endings that we're going to be experiencing. The story will be highly enjoyable with some twists. New Game Plus would be a twist. We've also been holding out some mechanics on purpose to make sure they go in this raid story. Sounds like redoing New Game Plus to me. Every single time. I'm just going to assume they're talking about New Game Plus. The story, no. The gear obtainable in this third Alliance raid is related to Nier and will make you think, oh, didn't see that coming. We've made it so players that haven't played Nier before will probably think, cool. We didn't have that sort of gear before in 14. I guess a Nier aficionado can probably take a better guess at that. I really thought they were going to do something Drakengard related, especially after seeing the way that the previous quest actually ended. But it'll be Nier based again. It could be Replicant. I mean, Replicant literally comes out this month, so maybe it won't be Nier Automata based, but it could still be Nier based. You know what I'm saying? So then, okay, new rare minions, some items that were hard to obtain in previous Nier Alliance raids will be easier to get. So buffing some of the minion drop rates, most likely. It's a fairly standard thing for them to do. Job changes, not really much to say because of Ultimate's postponement and the fact that there will not be very high difficulty content in 5.5. We're mainly going to change numbers, and they're just going to be raising a few numbers. So if you are a job that gets listed here, you might be hitting slightly harder until the expansion ends. Not a big deal. When looking at melee DPS, there are some jobs that have a hard time fully unleashing their potential. We're going to cover up with numbers where we think they're lacking. So if we feel like you're having a hard time playing it, we'll just bump your numbers till the end of the expansion. And they do say that no major job changes until 6.0. That's not really much of a surprise, especially, again, because of Ultimate's postponement. They really don't need to do as many sweeping job changes. Going into Unreal, this looks like it's probably a typo right here, so I'll go ahead and fix that. I took part in the new Unreal trial while tuning the fight and thought, was it really that difficult back then? Might even be harder than Titan. Now, the rest of these hints tell me that it's almost definitely what I guessed, Ifrit. So it will be a trial that has a main tank and off tank having important roles, while healers have their own mechanics. Sounds like the main tank having to deal with the multiple tank busters from Ifrit having their max HP lowered, and the off tank having to travel along with the DPS they're tethered to keep their damage taken down and the damage they're outputting up. And then having to do the really, really awkward tank swaps where if you get them wrong, you end up with a DPS chain going across the arena and significantly reducing the rate at which you can manage the nails. DPS will also have to think about how they're moving and will be expected of them to be careful about what's happening around them. That sounds like the healers dealing with Infernal Howl. Which was always a hilarious thing in the Extreme Trial back in the day. And Ifrit was generally considered pretty easy overall way back when, so, but it's been a long time, kind of like with Titan. Not a lot of people with experience with that are, like, caught up on it or, like, have it fresh on their mind or anything, even if you've done Ultimate. It doesn't work exactly the same as that. We realize this might be as difficult. Okay, listen, the only Savage Trial that I think actually requires this much, I guess, fluffing up is Ramuh. I am a firm believer Ramuh was actually the hardest of the A Realm Reborn trials. And you know what? All of these things really could apply to the way the tanks have to do tank swaps with the lightnings, and the healers had to be dealing with the healers and the DPS had to be dealing with either breaking the tether by collecting the orbs, or making sure they don't accidentally collect orbs, or making sure they break people out of the thunder thing. There's all sorts of different things that you could do there. So this could really be interpreted in a lot of different ways. I'm still going to hold on to, sorry, my phone just went off. I'm going to hold on to the idea that it's Ifrit, but I think honestly it could be any of them based on this description. It just really reads Ifrit to me. 6.1 Ultimate. Oh, that's always a fun little thing to touch up on. So it's not saleable yet, but we're designing it with the level 90 systems in mind, so there are high chances it will be based on level 90. You know, you'd think that would be something that would be, I guess, expected because it's coming out in 6.x. But a lot of people did wonder/ask if it would be level 80 because it was originally supposed to be released in 5.5. And for the reasons that I would have predicted, making it level 80 synced when we have our level 90 skills, I don't think that would be received all too well. And it seems Yoshida agrees. And it will also be tuned so you need the latest gear up to that point. Now, I've heard some people say that there are some additional details that aren't really content related, but more so exactly about their development and what led to them really, really having to delay it. I'd have to look into the actual Japanese article, but these are the more, I guess, important tidbits. But I know people are definitely curious about what about their development led to it having to be delayed. So I would definitely check out the original source, because I've had a few people tell me that that's definitely in the Famitsu interview. Unless there are multiple media interviews going around and Famitsu is just one of them, which is 99% of the time, that's how they do it. It's like a round table, or in this case, a digital round table. And it's just normally what happens. So we'll see. Crafting and gathering. Now this is scary. The new high-end crafting content will be extremely hard if your gear is not melded and optimized. So expert recipes. You'll have to think turn by turn about your next move while crafting. So expert recipes. It sounds like just higher scaled expert recipes. So even though there's no actual restoration, there are some things that are going on, and we knew this was going to be the case for a while. Rewards will be glittering main hand tools, no new gear in 5.5 for crafters and gatherers, new titles for big fishers, and 5.5 will have a new custom delivery client in Ishgard, and they will be related to Ishgard's high houses. They will be very unique, according to this right here. Moving into the Save the Queen series, and I promise it will come back to Ishgard so we can finish up our point about that. As of today, the number of players that have cleared Castro and finished the quest is more than 4 times higher than the players who have cleared Eureka. I'm not genuinely that surprised about that because it's a way easier thing to approach. Almost 50% of players are playing Bozja. That's significant. That's a lot more than I thought it was going to be. So to get that kind of number, I'm sure that they're looking at the participation there and considering that they've probably done a better job than Eureka. So I wonder how much that impacts things in 6.x about what they're going to be looking to do. We already know they are planning a deep dungeon, but that doesn't mean it's guaranteed, just that they are making sure that if they do a deep dungeon in 6.x, they know where it'll be, what its story will be, and all the gameplay mechanics involved. Always possible, doesn't happen, and we just get another zone though, so please wait and see. I've heard feedback regarding the fact that items needed for the resistance weapon are easier to get outside than inside Bozja and are reflecting on it. Good. It really doesn't make sense. I'm glad that people who don't want to do it that much don't have to. But it is kind of strange, you know, especially when it comes to the earlier steps with the memories, where I got all of them inside Bozja from farming clusters and doing CEs and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean it was easier. It was convenient and I walked away with a ton of them, but it was still definitely an ordeal. The new field in 5.5 called Zadnor will be content-wise pretty much as big as Bozja. New CEs and duels, pretty much as we expected. It is also confirmed a little bit later on there will be content similar to Castrum where you have to attack a fortress in Zadnor. Zadnor will include gear and mounts and will include something the players will want at any cost. That's usually a mount at any cost. I'm actually wondering if it's another EXP boosting item like the earring we got before, because that is always going to be something people will want at any cost. We don't really know what the pre-order bonuses are going to be for Endwalker yet, and we expect there will be an EXP boosting item, but they could always put one in here as well. And it could be more effective, or it could be something that works in conjunction with that. So I'm curious what this players will want at any cost item is. They also said they're changing the system for duels in 5.5. So if you don't get picked for a duel, basically the game will remember that and you'll have a higher chance of taking place in the next duel that's held. Now that seems to imply that if you leave the zone, that chance will be reduced, like it'll go back to being normal. It's not really 100% clear, and I hope they clarify in the upcoming live letter. That's how I read it, though. So let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. DR Savage will not be tuned down gear-wise, meaning they're not going to be, nerfing any of the bosses. This is kind of what we expected. We didn't think they'd be nerfing it, just it would be easier to do based on things that happen in 5.5, part 2. However, it will be easier due to new lost actions and new resistance rank. I really thought they were going to do new lost actions, so I'm glad to hear them confirming that there's going to be some crazy OP lost actions that should make DR Savage a little bit easier. And a new resistance rank cap. So I'm wondering how much of that they factor in. So resistance rank cap, which by the way, this confirms it's going over 15. Something anyone should have expected that Zadnor was going to do, but a hard confirmation right there. Resistance rank increases the amount of actions you can carry. It increases the weight of your satchel, basically. So by increasing the rank, it subsequently makes it easier to bring better actions or more of the actions that are already good. So this isn't that much of a surprise that they are talking about those two things. But previously, in an official translation, they mentioned gearing being a lot easier going into this. So like obtaining gear that would make you more efficient, DR Savage, would be a lot easier in 5.5. It was unclear if it was a brand new armor set they were referring to or making the previous armor sets that have the augments more available. I'm still of the opinion that it's probably a new set altogether, one that doesn't require the old sets, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. The number of players needed for tackling DR Savage will no longer be 48. This is something I felt like needed to happen, and there, from what I understand, is some dynamic scaling inside of the zone. It's not entirely static to the 48 members, or so I've been told by a multitude of sources and have not actually checked for myself, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. However, because we're removing this restriction, the fights will be harder. We're hoping that by lifting the 48 player restrictions, more players attempt the content. Something I expected, but I'm surprised to see them say it'll be harder. So I will say that even if they do downscale, taking a death is going to be way more impactful the less people that you have. One of your reflex dies, one of your tanks dies, a whole party gets wiped out. There's less people there to fix the mistake, which is always going to be a concern when it comes to content where death is nigh permanent unless you get lucky or somebody gets lucky for you. So I'm curious to see if it's really harder, or they're just kind of saying that it'll be harder because theoretically it should be. We'll see. The next step will be the last resistance weapon. Its strength will be similar to that of the previous last stage relic. Let me right click fix that. My bad. Now back to Ishgard Restoration. Ishgard Restoration is completed, but there will be a festival that will be held for a fixed period of time. It will be divided into a few steps and will be content you can casually take part in with new rewards. Can't promise Ishgard's housing area will be the same, pixel to pixel, but it'll be roughly the same. So yeah, just Ishgard will be continuing. I'm assuming those expert recipes that they mentioned earlier will have to do with the new festival, and that the rewards will be something that a lot of people want, especially while they're waiting for the end of the expansion to wrap up and for us to go into Endwalker. Now, a quick little note about PvP cheating. Apparently, there's been some cheating in PvP. I wouldn't know, because that would require paying attention to PvP. People were using third-party tools to get into the walls, overrunning data packets, and they were only using it to harass normal players and not to, like, climb the ranks massively, which is really, really strange. They investigated it, look for proof, terminate the accounts at hand, but apparently, while they normally look up the kind of internet connection and IP the cheaters are using, the cheaters were going so far as to change their hardware and IP repeatedly, which is not too much of a surprise, especially when you outright say in an interview the way that you check for their thing. Like, this is one of those cases where the less you say about it and the more action you take, the better off you probably are. Acknowledging that it's something that you're looking into and taking very seriously, as much as it seems like a generic PR response, talking about how you actually approach cheaters can actually be more dangerous to allowing people who now know how you look at it to try and get around it. That's to be say, it could be bait, then they come up with a different way, and then all of a sudden they don't actually know what to do. But I'm never a fan of saying what you're actually looking at and how far you're trying to go to ban these people, because then they know what you're doing and then they know to kind of work around it and what gives you trouble. They are considering something close to obstruction of business and currently discussing any measures. That means they might take legal action against these people. So that would be an interesting thing to see them take legal action against a cheater in a game. In Final Fantasy XIV in particular, I don't think there's a history of that. There might be in Japan. I feel like I remember something happening with that. But that might have been music related or something along those lines. I feel like I remember something, but it's kind of slipping my mind. Final Fantasy XIV for PS5. As long as you have a PS5, anyone will be able to take place in the open beta. We share more details on the forums. Now, if you have the PS4 version currently, you'll be able to use that data in the open beta. If you don't, sign up for the free trial and you'll be able to participate in the open beta as well. Also, if you have a disc version for the PS4, you will be moved to the digital version for the PlayStation 5. And the game's size on the PS5 will be about 15 gigabytes, my bad, less than the PS4 version, so it won't take up as much space. And they'll probably only be in beta for a little bit less than a month before they officially launch it. It makes sense. The odds are it will be fine and they won't need to really delay it. And if it is, then it was beta and they can always make adjustments before they officially launch it. They probably just don't foresee very many issues. And then a few miscellaneous things at the end. They are adding a bonfire minion, similar to, I assume, the floating sun thing to like change the lighting around you. It seems like they're just adding a bonfire as a minion, so people can just chill around a bonfire if they really want to, all on their own apparently, or maybe with a friend or two. There's a new instrument being added for performance in 5.55, or in 5.5 Part 2 as it's also known, making change to triple triad so it's easier to use 4-star cards. Yoshi P, don't tease me. Every time you bring up making triple triad easier to play with the number of cards in the game, every time I think you're going to unlock or increase the amount of 4-star cards you can use in a deck and then make it so you can only use one 5-star card. Every time I think you're going to do it and it doesn't happen, let this be the time or I'm going to be upset. No Allied Beast Tribe quest. I'm kind of surprised, a little bit, but you know what? I didn't keep up with the dwarves, so maybe this is the best one for me this is the best case scenario for me personally, but I really would have liked to have seen another Allied Beast Tribe quest. Maybe when we go back to the source, there'll be one. Making changes to the level sync and roulettes in the case that you're leveling with a pre-made party. That's an interesting one, specifically the level sync. So I'm wondering if this will make it so if you're in a pre-made party, you can choose to keep all of your abilities when you sync down, but only in a pre-made party. I would totally be okay with that because I hate doing roulettes in general, but if I do have to do them, this would make them way more enjoyable, at the very least in a pre-made like they're saying. I don't think it'll be that serious. That's kind of just what I'm hoping it is, but it's probably something where you're just not as weak or something. I don't know. What other changes could they make to the level sync on a pre-made party other than letting you keep your abilities? I don't know. If there is, somebody tell me, because I don't know. We spend money to make the G-Warrior and seriously can't use it just one time. They're going to do something else with it. Yeah, they didn't want to tell us they weren't going to use it until we'd seen the cloud deck, until we'd seen everything. So they probably just didn't want to say, no, we're not using it. They're going to use it. They're very much intending to use it again. So I'm curious to see how they will use it again. And then one last note. kind of creepy. Adding a Valens Vanvaro emote is pretty difficult since we can already see it being used at other players in a not so nice way. I'd imagine that has to be burned out the bat. It has to be that, right? Otherwise, I don't know what else it could really be. But man, that's some foresight. To look at that character and look at anything that character does is creepy and weird, and we don't want players having any control over anything even remotely like that. Because that's how I'm interpreting it. And from what I understand and from what I have from the unofficial translation, that is going to be a wrap for the Famitsu interview with Yoshi P. Thank you again to Lincoln or LKN111. I will be posting a link to this text format in the description of the video as well for anyone who wants to take a peek at it. And if we have any more interviews with some different information over the next several days, I'll be sure to get it to you. Anyway, I've got another video to go record. I've got some Monster Hunter Rise to play, and I've got some food to cook. So thanks everyone for hanging out. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for all the latest in Final Fantasy XIV and other things I'm interested in posting here on the YouTube channel. Thanks. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care.